welcome back to the Memory Leak podcast. I'm John Aljets, or as I am probably better known on the internet, BenderWaffles, and this week I am once again joined by my good buddy Esh.
Hello, that's me.
Hey Esh, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I am ready to talk, yet again, ready to rant.
I mean, I would hope so, because this episode is going to be relying pretty heavily on you, because this week we are talking about character design.
Yes.
You know, what is good character design? What makes them memorable, recognizable? You know, sort of what good practices should designers keep in mind?
Right.
Things like that. Now, one thing that you wanted to stress before we dive into this is that you yourself are not like a game designer.
I'm not a game dev. I haven't gone to an actual art school and been taught character design, in a school setting. But I've read about it like anyone else can online nowadays. I've definitely dabbled in it myself. I do teach digital art for beginners to kids. So some of the very basics I actually do tell them whenever I have them, which of course hasn't been much recently. So
you are, of course, one of my personal favorite artists online.
Oh, you.
And not just because I know you personally, but also just because, I love your style. And so I figured that Esh here was the best person to talk about this. Maybe someday I'll have an actual, professional on. Not to say that Esh isn't a professional, but you know what I mean. But for now, Esh will take us through some of the basics of what he does with character design. We will then talk through the process of some of the characters that he has designed, actually go through his thought process and really just analyze what he did. And then after that, we're going to look at the internal character design, how they are as a person. We'll probably wind up talking about the PEPSI system, because I will never shut up about the PEPSI system. No,
it is a very handy device.
Oh, it
definitely
is. So, stick around and let's go ahead and dive right into it. All right, so we're going to start this off by talking about what exactly is character design.
Right.
Or really, I guess what goes into good character design. So, Esh,
yep.
when you sit down to work on a character, I know that you don't do a ton of OC, but you do a little bit of it. When you sit down,
I've done some comics here and there, so
yeah. When you sit down to work on a character, what is the first thing that you do?
Well, the first thing is usually just, get the core idea of the character, and that doesn't have to be complicated. It can basically just be, okay, do I want a creepy guy? Do I want a young pretty girl? That very, very basic thing, and then you work from there. What is their purpose in the story? We'll get into it later with the PEPSI system. How did they get where they are now? What shaped who they are? And you want to communicate that visually somehow.
Would you say that you figure out the internal stuff well before you do any of the external?
Usually, yes. I mean, sometimes I'll have an external idea in my head, but it will change a ton of times during development, I suppose you would say. We'll get into it a little later, but I live in Denmark. We don't really have superhero characters, so I've recently tried to make very Danish superheroes. And I knew that I wanted one of them to be like the flag, like Captain America, just with the Danish flag, the white and red.
Captain
That outfit
Denmark.
has changed. Yeah, well, that's not his name, but it's the basic premise, and it's totally on purpose, by the way. It's not just me subconsciously ripping something off. It's something I'm doing on purpose. But that outfit has changed at least 3 times now. I keep finding other little ways to fiddle with it. But yeah, usually I'll have a basic idea of what I want, and then I'll figure out the internal stuff and add external stuff to it, at least personally. That tends to be how I do it.
Is there anything specific that you look at when you're actually designing a character? What is to you the most important aspect when you're getting that initial design down on paper? Or I guess digital paper.
Well, communicating the core idea, like I just said. Do you have a confident character? Give them a confident pose. Do you have a sneaky evil character? Give them a sneaky evil looking pose. Communicate the idea right away in body language, in overall shape. There's a lot you can do with basic shapes, really, when you're drawing. Not just making characters, but drawing in general. Basic shapes are very important to keep in mind. We can get into some great examples from video games in a moment, just to say that. But yeah, just communicating the core idea. What is this character supposed to represent? What part do they play in the story? And what are you supposed to feel when they're around? Of course, that changes depending on scene, but just what's supposed to be your first impression? That's usually the most important thing.
I've heard some people say, just from the brief bits of actual character design, study that I've done. A lot of people point out that the silhouette is incredibly important.
It is, but that can depend on what exactly you're doing. Because if you're doing a setting with regular human people for the most part, then the silhouette gets a little difficult, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're gonna have to start giving them various clothes or hairstyles or other accessories that make them stand out. And you can do that. You can give someone big ass hoop earrings, and suddenly they separate themselves from the rest of the cast. Or you can, of course, just stick with some body shapes, like have one be very, very wide, one be very, very tall and skinny. That's like a classic duo, you know, tall and fat and skinny.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you see that all over the place, because the contrast.
It's the Jay and Silent Bob.
Basically, yeah. I mean, even further back.
Yeah,
since the dawn of comedy, that has been a thing. But that's because it's just a great contrast. You want your characters to look different from each other, and hopefully as different as possible while still feeling like they belong in the same world. But I mean, when we go to silhouettes, that gets a little easier, and I put that in quotation marks, when we're talking about like cartoonish characters.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say right now, I know he's everyone's favorite punching bag on the internet concerning cringe, a term I hate, by the way, but Sonic the Hedgehog might be one of the best designed video game characters ever. Because that is a silhouette you recognize. You see that circle with 3 spikes in the back, you know immediately who that is.
You could almost argue that his silhouette is like the Mickey Mouse silhouette for games.
It is. I believe it's been documented by actual designers of the first game that he was intended to look like a Fleischer character, because he was always made to appeal to Americans first rather than the Japanese.
Well, I remember there was the story of Sega knew that they wanted a mascot character, so they held like a company-wide contest to design a character.
That's also the story. Like Eggman was originally supposed to be a main character, actually, a playable character. And
yeah.
Again, he has that egg shape, so that makes it a striking silhouette. He's literally an egg on legs, at least in his initial design, you know? Yeah, it just spreads all over that franchise. Why do you think all those characters stick out? It's not just because they each have a primary color or are a different animal. It's because that basic thing of the big round head, the little round body, and the big ass hands and feet, it works. It makes them stand out. It gives that franchise an identity. And yes, it's very much like Mickey Mouse. It's the same thing. Big round head, little round body, big ass hands and feet.
I feel like another great example from gaming of like recognizable silhouettes and just characters who are distinct even from a distance that my audience might, connect to a little bit more than Sonic the Hedgehog would be the cast of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, of course. That's a great example. I believe you used Cloud in a video once.
I did actually. My first Pepsi System video that I did as part of the RPG Maker tutorial series.
Yeah.
I broke down Cloud for the Pepsi System, and then I think the second time that I did it, I broke down Tony Stark.
You did. Which speaks into what I just talked about how to make human beings that normally have a fairly regular silhouette and make them striking.
Well, I mean, you put Tony Stark into an Iron Man suit and you immediately know who he is.
Exactly. I mean, you might want to, emphasize his visor.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he's just a bulky dude. If you really just make him a black blob, he's just a bulky looking dude in the suit.
Well, and
but
even
the second you add like square eyes and a little bit of that chin and jawline that he has on his helmet, then you got him.
Well, even outside of the suit, Tony Stark has a fairly recognizable silhouette because, like, he has, his hair is always styled a specific way. He does have, it doesn't really show up in a silhouette, but he does have the goatee that's very recognizable.
The goatee is very much a striking feature. I mentioned it before. I teach kids digital art and like basic character design. I guess you couldn't really call it teaching. It's more like a workshop. I let them borrow some tablets, but I do like stick with them and teach them things like basic shape language, circles, squares, triangles. What does each communicate? What can you build with these 3 basic shapes? And there's a lot to do with that. So what I teach them to do when they want to draw a specific character, if they want to draw fan art or their own, I always just say, okay, what's their most striking feature? Not necessarily their silhouettes or something like that. What's the thing you notice first? And with Tony, that would definitely be the goatee.
Yeah. I noticed that with a lot of characters, hair tends to be like the first thing that pops out when you think about somebody.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned Cloud.
Yeah, I mean, Cloud is the prime example. You think about Cloud, and the first thing you think of is, the
Cloud is in the same camp as like Goku and Yugi. If we go over to anime now,
it's all just hair that is so spiky that you could probably stab someone with it.
Because again, you look at Goku and you boil him down to a silhouette. Okay, he's a bulky dude, but then there's the hair.
See, but if you're just looking at hair, me not being a big Dragon Ball Z fan. This is a little bit easier for me. I look at his hair and I'm like, that's either Goku or that's Chrono from Chrono Cross. I can't tell. It's one or the other.
Well, same artist. So
yeah, they're both
basically
Toriyama. So,
but yeah, I'm just saying that that's very common. And with Cloud, you also have that big ass shoulder pad, and of course his sword.
Yeah.
Which also adds to the silhouette. Remember, accessories are part of the silhouette. If they're an accessory that are very closely connected to the character that they rarely part with, they're definitely part of the silhouette.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that when you're looking at like the Final Fantasy VII cast, you think about like who is probably the most who has the simplest silhouette would probably be Sid, but you can immediately
which one of them?
Well,
it's 7. Sorry,
the 7 Sid. You immediately recognize him because he has the cigar, which would show up even in his silhouette. Accessories can help.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, and then there's a spear, but
since we're on Final Fantasy, I'm going to go to my favorite Final Fantasy here for a second, because that has a design that harkens all the way back to Final Fantasy 1.
Have we ever talked about which Final Fantasy is your favorite? Because I, off the top of my head, can't tell you which one is your favorite.
Well, we actually talked about it in a video we did years ago. It's Final Fantasy 9, personally.
Okay, yeah.
Which also has to do with me not having played that many Final Fantasy games, I'll be fair and say that. So it's definitely also a nostalgia thing.
I'm going to update something about my favorite Final Fantasy, because we did discuss this, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 9 for the longest while was tied for my favorite. It has now officially become my second favorite.
It is great. It's a great game.
10 took it for me.
That's definitely a game where every character is very distinct.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the main ones that look the same would be our two protagonists, Garnet and Zidane, because they're basically just human beings with big heads.
Well, but then
Zidane has the tail.
Zidane or Zidane he has his tail.
I think it's Zidane. Yeah. He has the tail, right? And Garnet, or Prince or Dagger, depending on where you are at the game, gets 2 different hairstyles depending on her personality and her growth as a character. She has that very long, very smooth hair at the beginning that makes her striking. Then you have what's his name, Steiner, in his big weird armor. You have Amaranth, who's this weird dude with dreadlocks. You have Aiko, who's a 6-year-old girl. You have Quina, who's just this big frog thing with the chef.
He's basically a circle. That character is basically a circle.
She, by the way.
Well, Quina
is female.
Isn't Quina non-binary technically?
Quina, I don't know. I think Quina is specifically referred to as female in the game.
You know what? We're not going to get into that just because I feel like that's going to open a can of worms in my comment section that I really don't want.
Maybe. I think she's female. I remember it that way. Either way, my point is they all look very striking. But there's one character in particular I want to bring up, and that's Vivi. Because Vivi has the exact same silhouette as a basic Final Fantasy 1 Black Mage. Think back to Final Fantasy 1. That was a game where none of your characters had personality. You chose the party. You chose your characters. You had 8-bit graphics to work with. What do we do to make these people striking? Clothes.
Yeah.
Because they're these little chibi blob people. They're 10 pixels tall. There's not even that, I think.
I think they were 16 by 16. But
probably.
I might
They're
be
not
wrong.
very big. And that's where we start using things like color and accessories, because the red mage, they have the hat with the big feather. Cool, we can recognize that. The white mage has the robe. Cool, we can recognize that.
Which, by the way, I know
Warrior has the spiky hair, again.
I know that somebody in my comments will point it out. We're talking about Vivi looking like a black mage, and obviously he's a reference to the black mage.
Yeah.
When, during the kidnapping sequence with Garnet, she's wearing a hood to try to be unrecognizable.
The white mage hood.
It's the white mage hood. So I
love that so much.
I am going to point out that we know that.
Yes. I just wanted to speak of Vivi because Vivi stays that way.
Vivi is. You can talk about Vivi anytime with me.
Dude, Vivi is one of the best Final Fantasy characters.
Vivi is the best Final Fantasy character. Period, hands down. Love me some Vivi. Every time that I play Final Fantasy 1, which I've played a few times, I always name the Black Mage Vivi.
Aw, that's great.
Just always.
Which I think that's actually why Vivi has that name, because it's 4 characters.
Yeah.
I think that might very well be why.
And this is getting off topic, but in Final Fantasy Origins, the PS1 remake of Final Fantasy 1, one of the possible random names for the Black Mage is Vivi.
Wonderful.
So,
but my point is just that you look at Vivi, and there's a lot of detail on Vivi. There's, the cuffs on the sleeves. There's a lot of belts because it's Final Fantasy. Everyone has belts.
I mean,
there's those poofy parachute pants. Belts, it's got all of it.
Belts really hit their peak in Final Fantasy X with Lulu.
I want to get into her later. Actually, speaking of belts, but my point is just that you have all of this, and he's definitely distinct from the original Black Mage because that's literally just a robe and a hat.
Yeah.
But
he's got like a jacket,
basic shape.
He's wearing pants, and
it's the same basic shape because you have this big ass wizard hat and you have the glowing yellow eyes, and that's all you need. I mean, I just think that's a brilliant example of perfect character design in terms of Final Fantasy.
Yeah,
you're never not gonna recognize Vivi.
Yeah, even if all you see is like just the hat,
exactly,
you're gonna immediately know what character it is.
So that's one of my favorite examples in terms of RPGs in general. Yeah. I mean, we talked about Akira Toriyama too. There's a reason he's been hired to do 1 million RPGs, and he's the main artist on Dragon Quest.
Yeah, which
you're a big
Dragon Quest fan, Ball, so I was actually going to ask you to talk about Dragon
I mean,
Quest.
Sure, it all looks like Dragon Ball when you get right down to it because, that's his style, that's how he designs characters. But you can still always see which character is which. There are some that get a little trickier once you get down to silhouettes, like the protagonist of 6 looks exactly like a young Trunks, if you start doing that, a young Super Saiyan Trunks, so whatever. But there's always something. He's very good at finding a silhouette with fairly regular characters, or in just turning character design on their head, because you can use colors too.
Yes.
Colors are absolute. Now we're stepping outside of silhouette, but if you use basic colors, a strong color palette, like one of the most famous designs is Ryan or Ragnar from 4. He's just an old dude with a mustache and a warrior armor. That shouldn't tell you much, except the armor is pink and his mustache is blue.
Well, it's like, I remember...
That sounds ridiculous when I say it, but...
I saw an artist on, I think it was Twitter, might have been Instagram, who had done like minimalist like versions of characters where it was literally just a rectangle, but it was colored kind of in the way that you recognize the character, and you could tell exactly which character it is that they were doing.
Mario, how do you do Mario in a rectangle? Okay, you make the top half red, you make the bottom half blue,
I mean,
you're almost there.
In Mario's case, the character was almost a rectangle when he was first designed anyways.
Exactly.
So, that's kind of cheating. But I get what you're saying.
It's a very good exercise, actually, to see if your character is striking enough. And I know everyone hates them, but the minions would be another great example of how to do that very effectively.
Yeah, as much as I hate the minions because they're annoying, and as much as I hate their movies because they're mindless, I will say that the minions, and the thing about the minions is that they change shape and they change size, but you could still recognize that that's a minion.
Yeah, because they have the same basic. They're the same basic blue bean in yellow bean in blue overalls.
Yeah,
and goggles, and that's all you need. That's that's definitely a freaking minion, right?
Well, I mean, in minions, there's even some of them have 2 eyes, some of them have 1 eye, but you can still recognize it's a freaking minion because it's basically a banana in overalls.
And again, if we stick with colors, Spider-Man is a great example of that because that's not a silhouette you're capable of recognizing. You put Spider-Man in a silhouette, you don't have a character.
Dude. Yeah, it's just the most generic dude silhouette you've ever seen.
But he has the red and blue coloring and his poses.
Yeah.
That's where again we talk about silhouette because poses work too. You can communicate so much through body language. If you're drawing a character that is putting his 2 middle fingers to his palm and spreading the other fingers, that's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
If he's leaping or swinging from something, that's Spider-Man or Tarzan, but Tarzan usually has long hair,
Yeah.
And to get where I'm going with this.
And to build off of that, I want to, talk a little bit about because you're mentioning Spider-Man and made me immediately think about just this last fall we got Spider-Man Miles Morales, the game on PS4 and PS5. And, you talk about body language being one way to differentiate your characters. In that game, it's basically plays identical to Spider-Man on the PS4.
Yes, which was a wonderful game, by the way.
But you could immediately tell who was swinging, if it was Peter or if it was Miles, just based off of the body language as they were moving. And I thought that was a spectacular little detail that like really differentiated that game.
But also, okay, let's actually talk about Spider-Man a little more, because I tend to use him as an example when I'm teaching kids about drawing characters too.
I mean, everybody knows him, so it's
exactly. I make sure to pick characters that either everyone knows or are immediately striking.
Yeah.
We can talk about tons of superheroes that way, because the big ones have stuck with us for a reason. But in the case of Spider-Man, that dude has had 7 million costumes.
Yeah.
Let's just get it out there. I mean, those you see in the PS4 game are like a fraction of what has ever existed.
Is there a new Spider-Man issue out? Oh, he has a new costume.
More or less. So what I've done a couple times when I talk about learning to recognize characters is I've taken like 8 different pictures of Spider-Man in 8 different outfits, and I've asked the kids, what's the same between these? Not what's different, what's the same? And there's usually a spider emblem somewhere. He usually has the big eyes, but what's always the same is, again, almost always the body language. Almost always the swinging poses.
Yeah.
And I'm saying almost because, of course, there's always, exceptions. And usually there's red somewhere in the design. Even when he goes outside the box, it's usually red at one point or another.
Unless we're talking about like I mean, obviously you could think of examples like Future Foundation Spider-Man suit is just white and black.
Yeah, completely. But that has the spider emblem in the eyes.
Yes, it has the other things that are important.
There's always like 1 or 2 of them present.
Yeah.
And it's actually very effective. The kids understand the concepts a lot faster when they do it like that. I also use a lot of modern cartoons as examples.
So like, Steven Universe, Gravity Falls,
exactly,
things of that nature.
Exactly. Because a lot of people would be like, cartoons nowadays are badly drawn. They're too simple. No. They just use shape language in a completely different way than the ones you remember from the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, you look at something like, to me, when I think of modern cartoons, even though I know that it's not on the air anymore, the one that immediately comes to mind for me is Adventure Time.
Exactly, Adventure Time. That's as minimalist as it gets, man.
Yeah, because they're basically
those are just like blobs with dot eyes.
Yeah, they're beans with like tubes for arms.
Exactly, but they're wonderful. All you need to recognize Finn amongst a crowd of humans is his hat.
Yeah.
Just the little nubs on his head. That's all you need. With Bubblegum, it's her hair. With Marceline, it's especially her hair. And the fact that she tends to be flying around or carrying her axe, her base, which again has an axe blade on it, which also makes it stand out. Like there's tons to look at there. I use 2 cartoons specifically when I want to teach kids about, using squares, triangles, and circles. One of them is, of course, Steven Universe.
Yeah.
Because I'll ask the kids, okay, let me explain this to you. Let me show you how you can build any character with these 3 shapes. Do you know what Steven Universe is? Okay. And then I draw like a stick with an egg on top, a little triangle sticking out front, and 2 triangles on the back. And I ask, who's that? 9 times out of 10, they say Pearl.
Yeah.
That's literally all I've drawn, just an egg on a stick with 2 spikes. But that's true. That's what she looks like. All 3 of those characters consist of one primary basic shape. In Pearl's case, it's mainly triangles. In Garnet's case, it's mainly squares. She has the square afro, the square head. She has the square shoulder pads. She has the like cylindrical gloves that kind of look square in the right angle. Amethyst is all circles. And I also use Phineas and Ferb. Phineas and Ferb is a brilliant example of shape language. And I think Dan Poppenmeyer has outright said that was intentional. That with every character, they were like, all right, get us a basic shape. Because you can look at Phineas is the triangle, of course, with a big nose and head, always seeing him from the side.
Yeah.
Ferb has squares. He's like this big square with his hair. Well, that's a spike, but you get my point.
Yeah.
And his nose. And one thing that took me embarrassingly long to notice is the way their heads are shaped like the first letters of the title, which is right in the logo. So how the hell it escaped me for so long, I don't know. But that's brilliant. And it extends to everyone else too. Isabella, she's a half circle.
So
look at her head. She's a half circle.
So it just kind of goes to show that like you don't necessarily have to have the most overly complicated characters to still have effective character design.
I would argue that I tend to believe in less is more.
Yeah.
But applying your tools in the right places. Of course, depending on what you're doing, detail can be crucial. But yeah. You don't need to. Okay, I'm gonna go for a cheap shot. You don't need to pull a Rob Liefeld. it doesn't have to be.
All
your character doesn't have to have 10
love and
million
respect
pouches.
to Rob Liefeld.
Dude, I mean,
except for
I
the
can
fact that
clown on
he
him all
can't
I
draw
want.
feet.
I can clown on him all I want. The man revolutionized comics at the time.
He created Deadpool, and he did a lot for the comic world.
He did. It was stagnant. He came up with something new, and you can clown on him all you want. He deserves respect for that much. My point is, like, you don't have to do what he does and cover everyone in mechanical parts or pouches or zippers. Zippers is another Final Fantasy one too.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of zippers.
You can just have a dude in a shirt and pants and some funny hair, and that will be enough if it's striking enough. Just that got a little wilder than I thought. But silhouettes, basic shapes, strong colors, immediately recognizable attributes. Those would be the main things.
All important things. When you're going for like when you are trying to decide like what are the details that are going to make a character stand out. How do you go about like figuring that out? Like is it looking at like the character's past and figuring like, oh, this guy's a soldier, so he's gonna have pouches, or oh, you know, this lady is really into BDSM, so she's gonna wear a dress made out of belts. Like, how do you decide what are the things that are
less the past and more the premise, the overall premise? Because what would be a good example? Like, okay, so you mentioned a soldier, then yes, probably, if not outright give them armor, if they're a retired soldier, then, you know, give them clothes that communicate the same thing as a uniform. Let's say we have a former officer. Well, give that character, like, you know, tight, well-fitting shirts, dress shirts.
Yeah.
Because those things require some upkeep to look nice, like a uniform. Little things like that can go a very, very long way. Or, you know, give them the buzz cut.
Yeah,
you know, a little too trim of a haircut, or you know, give them square features to imply strength.
To go a different direction with that, though, you could do like if they're like active if they're an active duty soldier, that's a good way to do it. But one character who, and this is kind of going a little bit more into costume design, but it's a lot of the same principles. Look at somebody like John Rambo from First Blood.
Yes.
He's wearing, you know, he's got an olive drab jacket, you know, he's got the bandana, he's got all of these things that you look at and they scream veteran.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because John Rambo has become very much like an icon within popular culture, and so we recognize that as what that is supposed to be, but it communicates a lot about his character based upon just the way that he looks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also just because, and again, all respect, Sylvester Stallone has always looked like a kind of rough, messy guy.
Yeah.
He's not your picture-perfect Hollywood leading man physically. I mean, he is, in his own way, very handsome and you know, a strong bastard. But he's never looked like front-page material. He's always looked disheveled.
Yeah.
That's why he's perfect as Rocky. That's why he's perfect as Rocky.
Yeah.
Because that's supposed to be some street urchin who pursues boxing, probably breaks his nose like once a month. You know? Like, so that's perfect, yeah. Because, like, look at him. Okay, he's wearing the army clothes, or at least clothes that scream army, but they're never well fit. They're never, like, perfectly trimmed. They're always messy, like, thrown on that morning. Because the man has PTSD.
Yeah.
Like, he's not concerned about that. And I mean, and then you can go to the sequels when it's bandana and big ass muscles and, you know, miniguns, and that's a whole different story.
Oil and
yeah, that's a whole different story, but that still communicates soldier, just a very different aspect of soldier. So you can do that too. You can take the same premise and push it in either direction.
Yeah,
and get a completely different character out of it. Because I'm tempted sometimes to consider First Blood Rambo and all other Rambos two separate characters.
They pretty much are. All right, so now that Esh has given a lot of his thoughts on the process, let's actually break down a character that he's, you know, designed and look at how it was kind of applied throughout. We're going to start off with one who is a character that is actually making its debut technically with this podcast. If you're listening on the audio platforms, you won't be able to see it, but if you're watching the video, I will flash the graphic up on screen. This is a character that I actually commissioned Esh to design for a tutorial series that I am creating here shortly. You all know what it is, so I'm not even going to say what it is. it's Pokemon Essentials. Oh, I said
Yes.
what it was. It's Pokemon Essentials. But so this is a Fakeamon.
Yep.
And it is called Burbinard. It is a normal ice type doggo Pokemon.
Yes.
So Ash, go ahead and give us your thought processes on how Burbinard came to be.
So before I begin, you just said come up with some Fakemon. You didn't give me any specifics.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I need to make one that doesn't necessarily evolve, because that can be a separate thing in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, all right, I need something that works as a base Pokemon that never changes. That was like the first thing. And then I just started looking at animals, because most Pokemon are based on animals. If they aren't, they're based on everyday objects or myths. There's a common conception that Pokemon are random. No. Maybe some of the ones in Gen 1 are kind of random, like ball with eyes. But even then, that's like, oh, it's supposed to trick you into thinking it's a Pokeball.
There's at least some thought put into everything.
Yes, absolutely. All of them are based on specific animals. Even the weirdest traits are usually like an exaggerated version of what that animal can already do, or it's a combination of two different ideas. Like every single one you can do a full freaking video essay on. I mean, the Dex did that, with Pokekills and Alex Fasciani.
Yeah.
Which was a wonderful show. I'm so sad it's not around anymore.
Yeah, that's a bummer, but...
Yeah, really. But whatever. They're doing their own things now. But that's what you said. You just said, make up a Fakemon. And I was like, okay, I'm looking at pictures of animals, and I'm noticing that, okay, Pokemon has a lot of wolves and foxes, but very few domestic dogs. The only one I can think of is like the Herdier line from Generation 5.
Yeah.
Right off the top of my head. That's like a little Scottish Terrier. And it's a wonderful design. So it's like, okay, so that's based on this little terrier thing, and it grows bigger. What if we start in the opposite way? What if we do a big doggo? So, of course, my first thought is a Saint Bernard. And then I'm like, okay, what are common tropes about Saint Bernards? Because, every animal has its associated tropes, like snakes are sneaky, owls are wise, bears are lazy and or aggressive, so on and so forth. Okay, so Saint Bernards are extremely cute.
Extremely.
They're not very pretty, but they're big-ass teddy bears.
Yeah, I mean, like, anybody who watched that movie Beethoven knows all about how, like, messy but adorable Saint Bernards can be.
And anyone who watched Cujo will never want to go within 5 miles of Saint Bernard. Either way.
Yeah, we're not going quite in the direction of Cujo, but
no. So I'm like, okay, it needs to look cute and dopey. And I'm like, what's the main characteristic of Saint Bernard? The tongue.
Yeah.
We always think of dogs as like wagging their tongue and drooling, but Saint Bernards are like the ultimate example of that. You almost never see a Saint Bernard without its tongue hanging out. So it's like, cool, let's do that and let's exaggerate it like crazy. Let's just have a big ass licky tongue on this thing, which you'll see if you can see the graphic right now. Okay, so we have that, but it's Pokemon. We gotta give this thing some kind of superpowers. Because it's Pokemon. Even if it's normal, it's gonna be able to do something crazy. So I'm going like, what are some common tropes otherwise? What role does a Saint Bernard usually play when it shows up in fiction? And I remembered the old trope of rescue dogs. And I'm pretty sure it's a myth, but you've probably seen it in cartoons at least once. These Saint Bernards that like dig people out of avalanches.
Yeah,
and have this barrel.
I mean, Saint Bernards actually do that, but they don't do the barrel thing.
No, exactly. The barrel thing is, I think that's a misconception or a myth. But the idea is, you've seen it in cartoons, they have this barrel around their neck that supposedly has alcohol in it, bourbon, rum, something. I don't remember exactly what. Because it's supposed to, warm people up inside as they're being carried away. So I was like, why don't I do that? Why don't I use that and make that this Pokemon's thing? So I'm sitting there like, okay, so Pokemon are wild. You find them in the wild. So he can't be carrying a handmade barrel. Well, just a human-ass barrel. That's not going to happen. You're not going to find that in nature. So instead, I was like, what would be the equivalent? And I came up with this, like, piece of tree trunk. And instead of alcohol, which, I don't imagine a dog in the wild, brewing its own whiskey. So instead I was like, what would the equivalent be in an actual log of wood? And that would be sap.
Yeah. So
now I have this idea of a dog Pokemon that carries around a tree trunk, which has this rich sap that can heal other Pokemon if it finds them knocked out in the wild. If a trainer has been grinding near the Azumarill Lake before a particular gym, and there's just dead Azumarils everywhere. Here comes Burbinard healing these little bastards up.
Well, and then like from there, I assume you just like, okay, you knew that it was going to be an ice type, so it's probably going to be blue. And
I started with normal because, it's a common dog. Well, not common, but it's a dog.
Yeah.
We all know a Saint Bernard. They can show up just about everywhere. It's a fucking dog. So normal. Boom. There we go. And then it's like, okay, so my idea was that it crawls around in the ice and helps people out of avalanches. let's make it an ice type. And then you're like, okay, but that's another thing with Pokemon. Which type is dominant?
Yeah.
Which type is the most important one, which in this case would be normal, I think. This isn't gonna be a dog that's gonna blast Ice Blast or Blizzard or whatever. It's gonna be a dog that can survive the cold.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into game mechanics. What moves would this dog have? I'm thinking it would have Lick, because it has a big-ass tongue and it's a dog.
Naturally.
Pretty much all dogs have that basic physical attack, tackle, takedown, body slam. And of course, something akin to Miltank's milk drink, where it could drink its own sap to heal up a little.
Yeah.
Possibly rest, like a Snorlax. It would be a tanky bastard, this one. It would absolutely be a wall, in terms of gameplay. I'm not a competitive player, by the way, but... that would definitely be it.
He certainly looks like he would be a tanky boy.
Yeah, he would be a damage sponge. Yeah. That's the idea. And able to heal himself or others to really, keep your team going for freaking ever. And like in terms of ice moves, maybe Ice Fang, or I think there's a move called Ice Fang. I don't remember exactly.
It's one of the elemental bites. I think Ice Fang would probably be the best ice type move for it. I couldn't see it.
Probably be the only one.
I couldn't see it using Ice Beam. Maybe Blizzard, but
yeah, maybe.
It seems a little weird to have the dog that's sent out to rescue people from blizzards using Blizzard.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course an ability would just be like, okay, it's unhindered by snow.
Yeah.
Which is a weather effect. I don't remember what exactly it does, but that doesn't work on Bourbonard. Yeah. Boom, there we go. And now you have a Pokemon.
Ta-da!
Get your basic idea, visualize. Well, I could also say it's color palettes. It's ice type, so it's just like, all right, what's ice colors? Blue.
Gotta
admit,
blue.
I admit I basically lifted the color palette from Cubchoo and Beartick.
I was gonna say it very much with the tongue and everything. It kind of honestly reminded me of Cubchoo, because Cubchoo's got that big snot bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now Bourbonard has the tongue with the drool. So like it's kind of cut from the same cloth, but very much unique.
It's the same basic idea. It's a big fluffy ice mammal.
Yeah,
that's basically what I'm going for.
But I mean, like,
so there you go. That's how I came up with a Pokemon.
Yeah, and palette wise, like, yeah, you basically lifted it from Cubchoo and Beartick, but it's still pretty much all ice Pokemon use that exact same color palette.
Exactly, like so most grass Pokemon are green to some extent. Bug Pokemon too are usually green.
I will say,
if not outright rainbow colored.
This is getting a little bit more into gameplay than anything. Looking at Bourbonard and understanding the idea that it's carrying around a tree trunk that has sap in it. I almost, I'm looking at it and I'm almost tempted to say that it would probably work really well also as a ice grass Pokemon.
Oh yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I'm sticking with normal in my mind.
Yeah. But
either way, that's the basic process. I'm gonna make a Pokemon. I have this requirement. It has to be a single type. I don't want it to evolve. I'll probably come up with something else for when you need to do that.
Yeah.
Just so you have a dedicated Pokemon for that tutorial.
Yeah.
Or a type later or whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't think there's room for more types in Pokemon at this point, but that's a different discussion
I will be having an episode where I'm going to be teaching how to add types, but
all right.
It's only because Pokemon Essentials doesn't have fairy type built in.
Oh, okay.
At least the older versions don't. I don't know if the newest version does. I haven't dove into it yet. But so I will be adding types. But
like I said, look at your requirements. What do you want to create? Look at if you're adding something to an already existing thing, look at what's missing and try to fill that hole.
Yeah.
And from there, just like, okay, here's my idea. What's associated with that idea? Cool. What do I want to use? Because I could have gone the scary Cujo route. That wouldn't have made sense.
I mean,
because the whole point of Cujo is that's unlikely from such a fluffy, cute dog.
But I think that going a Cujo route would have been interesting, because you could have gone with, like, I don't know, normal ghost or something, and had
that's the regional variant.
Yeah, and have like this, like, instead of him like having a tongue and looking derpy, he's snarling and's got like drool coming out of his mouth.
Actually, now that I brought up regional variant, I've seen people say, oh, that's just a lazy way to sell you the same Pokemon. And like, no, read the decks.
Yeah.
The dex actually justifies the design changes. I mean, it's obviously exaggerated that nature doesn't work like that. Exactly, anyway. But they always justify the design change.
See, I would say that like nature works more like regional variants than evolution.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm just saying it's still very exaggerated.
Yeah, pretty much. So real quick, I want to keep this section a little bit on the shorter side, but why don't you talk me through some of the thought process on one of your superhero characters?
So, like I said, I live in Denmark. We don't really have superhero characters that aren't that aren't parodies. So I've just been like creating a small universe of my own. I want them to work in my setting. I don't want them to be American superheroes that just happen to look like Danish superheroes, you know?
Yeah.
So my first thought was basically, okay, well, what's the most American superhero I can think of outside of Superman? Captain America.
Naturally.
Cool. I need a Captain Patriotic character. So I'm like, cool, I'm gonna base one on our flag, which is basically just a white cross on a red background, for those that don't know. So I'm like, cool, those are my main two colors, and I'm gonna need that cross somewhere on him. Now I have to place it sideways, like on the flag, because otherwise it's gonna send a lot of weird images and suddenly get very religious, you know?
Yeah.
We don't want that, and I don't want it to be red cross either. So
Yeah.
we don't want any of that shit. So I'm like, all right, can I think of any clothes that have this? And I look at our royal guards, like the ones they have in Britain too, who have these red and white suits, basically. So I'm like, all right, we'll base it somewhat on that. That's what I did at first, at least. I've later, changed it around a bit. And in my version, like, I sort of came up with these characters as a way to play with the idea of these types of fiction not being that popular in Denmark. So these guys aren't going to be like Iron Man or Captain America with a huge ass government secret works stuff behind them to give them money for gear. Mm-hmm. So their costumes are going to be very basic. So I made it more like a uniform, something you could imagine someone made and would sew at home. So like fairly regular mailbox red pants and a jacket, and then sort of like adding the cross to that jacket and across the arms, so it looks a little wider than it does.
Yeah.
Then I gave him basic white gloves and like white sneakers, actually. Again, sneakers to sell that this is a dude who does this at home.
Yeah, because I remember you talking to me about the character, and I got the vibe that he was pretty green as far as being a superhero.
All my characters are, but he wants to be a classic superhero. He wants to be the ideal. So that's also why his costume is very classic in a way. He also has like a plain red domino mask.
Yeah.
Because that's about as classic superhero as you can get, right?
Pretty much.
So that was my, and I did give him a shield, but that's actually more of a pun than anything, because there's like an old folk hero in Denmark called Thunder Shield, and that guy is like on our matchstick boxes. So there you go. And I'm like, okay, well, if he doesn't have money, it's not going to be made of vibranium or whatever. It's just going to be something he does in a woodworking shop, man. So that shit is going to break all the time. And in my mind, eventually they'll upgrade somehow. I don't know exactly how. But okay, so we have this character. Now we have a dude in a not stars and stripes, red and white suit.
Whatever the Denmark version of Stars and Stripes.
Yes, Dannebro is what it's called, but there we go. So now we have him. Okay, he's a superhero. Let's give this boy some powers. And I'm like, okay, what's the go-to for Danish fantasy? Norse mythology, of course. We have Thor. You know Thor.
Yeah. Everyone
from
knows
Marvel
Thor.
Mainly, but he's based on an old Norse god. I'm like, all right, let's look to the same place. And that actually gave me the idea for his origin story as well. So I'm like, what can we do? What's Viking-like, but not so Viking-like that I need to give this guy horns? And I'm like, okay, so he has super strength, of course. That's par for the course.
It's pretty standard power.
And then I looked at like a game that's very, very based in Nordic ideas. Skyrim.
Yeah.
And I thought of the Dovahkiin and their Fus Ro Da yell, Fus Ro Boof.
Yeah.
And I'm like, give him that. Give him a concussive yell and call it a battle cry, like a Viking storming into battle. Finally, I also gave him minor electric powers because Thor.
Classic.
And now I'm sitting there like, okay, so how did he get these powers? Where the hell did they come from? And my idea was that he, when he was a normal man, rescued a family member from some kind of mythological being. And Thor saw that and rewarded him with a little bit of his power. But he doesn't know that. He was unconscious when Thor like came in and saved the both of them. But he saw this guy's bravery and was like, I'm gonna give this guy a bit of my power and see what happens. And then he just fucks off.
Like gods.
But that was my basic
do.
idea. Yeah. I mean, gods are fickle and weird, and especially Norse gods are very fallible.
Yeah.
Like they're basically just humans with superpowers anyway.
Basically.
So if you read the myths, they're very, very weird like that. They're not completely psychotic like the Greek ones, but whatever.
Jesus.
So now I have a character. A young man who was blessed by Thor, and I don't know exactly when he discovers the powers or how that happens, but he's blessed by Thor, and he decides, oh shit, I'm Denmark's first superhero. Let's make sure people can tell. And there you go.
Hell of a process.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it goes, man. And then, of course, from there, I gotta give this guy some villains. So I'm just like, I'm gonna base those on Scandinavian folklore. They're not going to necessarily be those characters, but they're going to hearken to them in some way.
Yeah.
Use the same basic concepts. So one I have is one I call the bog hag. Because like it's an old idiom in Denmark that whenever it gets foggy, that's the hag in the bog who's like brewing a potion and all the fog is like the steam from her kettle. So now I'm like, okay, let's get a character who can like use water and fog as her powers. And let's make her an old lady. Because how many old lady supervillains can you name off the top of your head? My guess is not a lot.
I mean, I could think of a couple, but not many.
Moira Queen, maybe, but she's not exactly a supervillainess.
Yeah.
Granny Goodness, but she's literally a goddess.
Yeah, that was the one I was going to go to. I mean,
Yeah.
Madame Web, technically?
Yeah.
Although she's not a villain.
She's not really a villain. Well, see, there you go. So I've already filled a niche there, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go into as much detail as did before, but okay, she can use water, she can use fog. I'm gonna say that she has found the Fountain of Youth, and that has given her water powers somehow. But I don't want to do the classic old lady wants to be young again thing, because that's a cliche at this point.
Yeah, basically.
So I'm like, okay, once a year she drinks a little bit of it to stay the same age forever, because she's content with her age and her wisdom.
So she's one of those old people who like enjoys the perks of being an old person.
Yes, but I also don't want her to be particularly sympathetic. I want her to be evil.
Yeah.
So I want her to be like an old witch. And of course, I can't give her the full witch outfit because that would look ridiculous. But I'm thinking if she's using water powers, give her a raincoat. Raincoat with a hood that can kind of look witch-like when you put it in a silhouette. Hey, we're back to the silhouette. A raincoat with like a pointy hood, and we'll make it blue because water. And then underneath it, we'll give her like a garish-ass granny dress. And what's the most garish color you can put together with blue? In my mind, it's yellow.
Yeah.
And now you have a small elderly lady in yellow and blue who can control water. That's a character, all right.
All right, so we've talked all about the external character design, and Esh has been kind of touching a little bit on internal character stuff, but now we are going to bring it all together, and we're going to talk about how to take somebody and make them feel like a fleshed out person more than just a badass design.
Right.
Now, obviously, anybody who's spent any time on the channel will know that I like to use something called the PEPSI System. Now, the PEPSI...
That's a great name.
Right? The PEPSI System is actually something, I'm sure that, I have a feeling that this exists elsewhere, but a version of it was first presented to me when I was in high school. A drama teacher, well, he wasn't a drama teacher, he was actually an English teacher, but he was doing drama because tiny school.
Right.
And he presented something that was kind of similar to it, but I took it and I expanded it out, and I fleshed it out and made it more generalized, not just for, actors. Making it something that writers could use, that game designers could use, so that anybody could use. And that's the PEPSI System, PEPSI. And basically each one of these letters corresponds to something that you want to kind of like dive into and flesh out within a specific thing. We've got psychological, emotional, physical, it's physical, emotional, psychological, societal, and interpersonal.
Right.
So let's, Esh, as a fun little thing, let's take the PEPSI System and let's kind of reverse engineer a character using it. It's something that I've done in some videos.
Yeah.
But let's...
What do you have in mind?
Let's go ahead and let's do your Danish superhero.
Right. I should say right away, there's still a lot of him that's undeveloped, but that's the basic design.
Well, maybe we'll help flesh him out a little bit then by doing this. Of course. So... Obviously, let's start with the first P, physical. We already kind of have.
Well,
that.
I mean, we just went through that.
Yeah,
we just went through that whole debacle.
We know who that is, but for those of you who aren't fully paying attention, physical. Obviously, it's just describing who they are or what they look like, basically.
Yeah.
This is also where you'd put any kind of information about, like, do they have any scars? What is their like defining character trait physically?
Right.
Moving on into the E, we've got emotional. So this is their outwardly facing behavior. Do they act depressed? Do they act sad? Do they lash out? Things of that nature. So Esh, with I'm going to call him Captain Denmark.
do that. I haven't settled on a name. I want that one that translates well, so I'm still working on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna call him Captain Denmark for now, just because in my head that's who he is. So what is his like outward facing emotion? You would say, like, how does he behave?
So he's a young man who has been given superpowers. He's basically the first superhero in the country. And he, of course, wants to project confidence. Mm-hmm. He wants to look like he knows what he's doing. He wants to look like a Captain America type. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'm the first guy. I'm the one the others should be looking to. But I'm not that good at it yet. That's gonna be it, basically. This guy does not know what he's doing. He's a regular-ass young adult, living on his own, trying to make ends meet. Classic Peter Parker style, really, there. But it's just like, I have this ideal of what a hero is that I want people to see. But when I'm actually in the field, I might behave slightly differently. Like, if someone throws a car at this dude, he's gonna panic.
So he projects confidence, but he's also tends to be a little erratic because he panics.
He attempts to present confidence. He doesn't always succeed.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it.
Sorta, yeah. Because, like, he's still just a dude, man. Like, and if ever, I mean, if you're running around with a country's flag on your chest, you're eventually gonna run into some trouble.
Eventually.
For sure. And that's definitely something I have in mind. And he's not gonna know how to handle that. He's not gonna be able to, like, tackle that in a mature way right off the bat. He's gonna be like, wait, I didn't even consider that could be a thing. I just wanted to be a good guy.
Yeah. And
so stuff like that,
That is actually a perfect segue into the next P, which is psychological, which is basically the internal emotions.
Right.
How does what is going on affect him on a personal level that maybe he doesn't necessarily project out to the world?
Right. That would be part of it.
Yeah. Something like dealing with the ethics of a situation, or the internal struggle that he might have with the fact that he feels like he needs to be, a role model or whatever.
And also just that he lives in a small country. It's not going to be crawling with supervillains the same way New York is in the Marvel universe, He's gonna not have a lot to do at first, which in and of itself is funny, a superhero with no one around to fight. If anyone's watched Freakazoid, they remember the Huntsman. That's just hilarious.
Yeah, he'll basically just like
amazing sketch.
Like go to Copenhagen and just be like, "Yeah, I'm here now."
I mean, basically, or he'll run into stuff on the way and he'll have that classic, well, now I need to find somewhere to change. And I'm not Superman. I can't just run into a phone booth because A, those don't exist anymore. And B, I can't change that fast. So little things like that. And I also want to do things like showing him coming home tired as if he's been to work,
Yeah.
And I actually got this from, there's a Marvel character called Gravity. In his first issue, he keeps checking the news to see if there's any stories about him because he really wants to be a superhero. Mm-hmm. I think that's amazing because that's totally how a person would act.
So he's
and you rarely see that.
So basically, in a nutshell, he's a character who, like, I'd assume that he grew up with, like, he knew about Superman and he knew about Spider-Man, and so
I think I'm probably gonna go the parody route with that, but yeah,
but
like America is full of superheroes.
But he knew about other superheroes, and maybe he grew up and he idolized them or something, and so now he feels like he needs to step up, and be Denmark's that, and so with that would probably come uncertainty. Obviously fear, because when you're going to be
honestly, most of my superhero team here have their own confidence issues, which probably is taken partly from me personally, but that's a different talk altogether.
Well, I mean, all writers put a bit of themselves into
there's definitely work. Also because I feel like weak men are still a little underrepresented in fiction, at least in a believable way. So that's the thing. I like confidence issues.
Yeah.
So all of them have them.
And so let's step on over to the S, which is societal. This is largely a character's place within the world.
Right.
Are they poor? Are they an orphan? Are they, are they Bruce Wayne? Are they rich and an orphan? Are they like, where does their family...
Are they a weird space alien who doesn't know how the Earth works, like Starfire?
Yeah, stuff like that. Like where do they fit within society? as a whole.
In this dude's case, he's going to be, I mean, I already said it with the Peter Parker thing. He's going to be a young everyman.
Yeah.
He's going to be someone you can recognize because we've all been out of on our own in our early to mid 20s and not really known what to do with ourselves.
Yeah, maybe living
and
paycheck to paycheck, you know.
Not having a good job yet, not eating well.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. I don't want him to be like dirt poor. I don't want to pull the Spider-Man where Aunt May is about to die from a heart attack every 3 seconds and the house is basically already sold.
Yeah.
I don't want to go that far, but I want him to be like, shit, can I afford to go drinking tonight?
Yeah, he's like every, you know, early to mid 20s guy.
My friends want to go to a concert. Can I go?
Yeah.
Is that actually a thing I can do if I want to survive the next week? Like, we're that level.
When you're sitting there and you're choosing between, like, do I go out drinking tonight or do I pay rent?
Yeah, well, maybe not quite to that level.
Okay,
but
do I go out
somewhere in
drinking
that-
tonight or do I eat food for the next week?
Yeah, maybe. Stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. I think everybody at some point, unless they grew up
most
very
people definitely
lucky, have
But
been at
he's
that
also,
point.
but that also means like, okay, so he has probably a basic education because most education in Denmark is free, most basic education. So he's probably like been to university and studied something. I'm not sure what yet, but it's probably going to be something fairly common. He's not going to be some kind of super scientist. He's not going to have a master's degree in chemistry or something like that. It's gonna be. He's probably gonna more have either learned a trade or some subject that interests him personally, and that's why he can't find a job.
Gotcha.
Another one that you and I know well.
Oh yeah, true.
So something like that. You know, that's basically gonna be his place. Probably doesn't have his own car because that shit's expensive, which is gonna make superheroing really weird.
Oh, I feel that.
I mean, I can't drive for a variety of reasons, so that's not even an option for me. But
I sold
whatever.
my
That's kind of the
car
point.
before I moved. For those of you listening, I just moved to Texas.
Right.
Yay, 1,800 miles away from where I was. So
It's a long ass way.
I didn't trust my truck to make it, so I sold it. So now I'm sitting here just like, can I afford to buy a new one? Currently, no.
So that's basically it. I want him to be an everyman. I don't want him to be like dirt poor like that because that's just, it doesn't really work for this kind of character who's supposed to represent like Steve Rogers, right? You don't think of him as a rich guy, although he probably is most likely. But he's Captain America first, and he's Steve second.
Yeah, he represents America, so he represents Americans.
He represents what he believes is the ideal.
Yeah.
This guy tries to represent what he thinks is the ideal.
And then finally, the final I is interpersonal. So interpersonal looks at their relationships with those around them.
Right.
How close are they with family? Do they have a bunch of friends? Are they a loner? You know, stuff like that. So with this character, I guess like let's break it down. First, let's look at, you know, family connections.
The only one I have really defined well is his mother. The mother is going to be kind of conservative, and conservative in Denmark doesn't mean exactly the same thing as in America, by the way.
Yeah.
We're not talking like keep the foreigners out of here necessarily. I don't want to go to that level because that's immediate hate sink right there. But
yeah.
I'm gonna go the route of like things are supposed to be a certain way. On holidays you eat this. When someone wants a present, you get them this particular brand. I want her to be that kind of character.
So it's traditionally conservative.
Yeah, not full Karen.
Yeah.
Like the first story I have in mind with this guy is that he runs into some superhero shenanigans while out buying a present for his cousin for a birthday party. And, you know, he does the superhero thing and he remembers to get the present at the end. You know, oh, the earrings, I've got to buy those. And he shows up at the party and his mother berates him for getting the wrong ones. You know, his mother does that. The cousin herself doesn't care. She's just happy he's there. But his mother will be like, that's not the brand I told you. Why do you never listen? Why don't you care about people? He's going to go that far. So he definitely has mommy issues, I guess you could say, in that sense. Like, that's also why he wants to represent an ideal and wants to be looked up to, because he doesn't know what that feels like.
Yeah.
He hasn't been able to do anything right his whole life because his mother is so traditional, and no matter what he does, it's probably wrong somehow. Again, I don't want her to be evil. I don't want to be one-dimensionally cruel with this.
It's just it's one of many like mother archetypes across fiction.
Pretty much. And I just think it's interesting to have a character. And again, that's actually kind of Peter Parker-like too. You know, whenever he accidentally hurts May's feelings or she says something mean about Spider-Man, and that cuts so deep.
Yeah.
Because that's me you're talking about.
Yeah. So does he have...
I kind of wanted that. I kind of wanted that, yeah.
Does he have like an extended family as well? You know, you mentioned like cousins and stuff like that. So I'd assume
I haven't quite yet. Well, yes, cousins. So he obviously has an uncle and an aunt somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly yet. I haven't like filled out a whole ass family tree because I want them to kind of come up naturally.
One thing that I want listeners to recognize is that when you're filling out like a Pepsi breakdown of a character, you don't have to have all the answers.
No. They can show up as you write your story.
Yeah, like the idea when you're first doing a Pepsi breakdown, it's kind of just really to get out the things that you have already thought about onto paper and to get you thinking about other things.
Yes.
So like Esh here not knowing, you know, if this person like has a dad or brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, cousins, you know, twice removed, whatever, is perfectly fine.
Yeah, he's just not developed yet.
Yeah.
Like, okay, again, let's go to actual superheroes. How many of Spider-Man's characters do you think showed up in the first year? Wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong. Whatever number you said, wrong.
But,
I guarantee it.
So going back,
As stories happen and a new character is necessary to move that along, they will happen.
they will come in and the character's relationship will be, you can call it a retcon, but you know, it just is what it is.
I mean, that's if you go like, oh, I have a long lost brother or whatever. That's kind of cheating, I guess. But stuff like, oh, we have a coworker that's going to play a part in the role now. That's not.
Yeah.
You don't know all your coworkers by name. You don't know what the hell the guy 3 floors down is doing.
They aren't an integral part of who you are as a person.
But they can become that.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess we'll just kind of bring this episode into a close. Esh, do you have any final thoughts on the topic of character design?
My final thoughts is that, well, it's not as complicated as you think, and it's way more complicated than you think.
Yeah.
It's not just about making a character that looks cool. That's the first step. It's also about justifying why they look cool, why they look striking, why they look sad, why they do basically anything. And, you know, take inspiration from anything, man. No one's saying you have to come up with everything from scratch yourself. It's perfectly all right to be inspired by others. If you like Final Fantasy characters with zippers and belts everywhere, do that, but find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
Find a way to justify it. Like, you mentioned Lulu earlier, like, okay, she took the belt idea and ran with it. And she also kind of like, okay, why does this character have belts everywhere? What is a fashion statement that uses a lot of belts and leather? Oh, goth. Let's make her a goth black mage.
Well, and also like
cool.
her dress and the belts and everything speaks to her as a character because, you know, she's holding on to the past, so she's being held back.
Yeah.
What holds things in? Belts.
Now you're getting into the symbolic part of it. But yes, precisely. Like, I'm just saying, don't overthink it, but absolutely think a little harder than, oh, this dude has a scar because he's rad.
Although,
you're not done.
Nothing wrong with just adding a scar because they're rad.
No, of course. I'm just saying there's more to it. Just
yeah.
It's hard to say. It's hard to boil this down to one statement. But it's just know your character, design your character, get to know your character, redesign your character.
Now, Esh, if people wanted to see you slap rad eye scars on people, where could they find you on the internet?
Well, they can find me on my main channel, which is Fiction Addiction, which is like a sketch review show where I poke fun, I guess, but mostly I just want to share obscure media I find, like video games nobody talks about, weird old movies, weird old cartoons, or just stuff I think hasn't been brought up enough. So you can find me there. I'm also on Twitch as Esh, as ESHBAAL. And there you can watch me play games on Tuesdays, usually horror, RPGs or platformers, and draw on Thursdays. Mostly I'm drawing fan art of, popular franchises, but you can find me there.
Yeah.
And I'm on Twitter as well, so that's ESH_FigAddict.
So yeah, get over to those platforms, check him out, especially check out his art. As I said, one of my favorite artists on the internet right now.
Oh, you.
So, go over there, check him out. He also, he did some of the character design in the thumbnail if you're watching on YouTube. So,
right.
You've already seen some of his art. But, anyways, go check him out. And if you want to find more of me on the internet, of course, I'm on my YouTube channel, BenderWaffles, BenderWaffles. Over there, I, talk game development and things of that nature. Basically, what I talked about in this podcast. Also, you can find me on Twitter. That is my main social media platform. @BenderWaffles is my tag. I already spelled it out for you, so I'm not going to do it again, even though I can I do enjoy prattling that off. Go over there. I usually talk about movies more than anything on my Twitter, but I do touch upon games and game design every once in a while. So, get over there. I'm a fun follow, I think. I also tag Esh in a lot of things. So,
What kind of dad sign off is that? I'm a fun follow on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm a fun follow. But anyways, guys, next week we're going to be talking about Mass Effect with my buddy Owen. So be around for that. Until then, though, keep on developing.